Derek Lunsford is your reigning and defending Mr. Olympia champion. He took the title in 2023 at the Olympia event, and in doing so brought one of his best packages ever to the Olympia stage. But in terms of Olympia winning versions, this is also Derek Lunsford's worst, I guess, if it's his only one, right? And that's what we're going to be doing today, guys and gals. We're going to be going through the history of the Olympia champions, and we're going to find their worst Olympia showing, their Olympia winning showing, of course. And in Derek Lunsford's terms, and a couple of other guys, it's kind of ridiculous, right? Well, of course it is. They're one-time champions. It's their best and their worst. So for the one-timers, we're going to find their absolute worst version. And in Derek Lunsford's case, like I said, he's great. He competed in 2022. He looked great there, too. I mean, that's probably not his worst version. 1 year prior, he was the 212 champion. And some people call that the Mr. Olympia. Some just reserve the Mr. Olympia to the Open. But if you're going to count Derek's 212 versions, I guess back in, say, 2018, I believe it was, that was probably Derek Lunsford's worst ever Olympia showing. But for this video, we're going to focus mainly on Olympia wins. So the multiple-time champions are going to be more of the focus. But of course, we're going to name every single champion just for fun. And of course, guys, Larry Scott. If you don't know Larry Scott's the first ever champion by now, come on. Well, you do now. Larry Scott, 1965, 66. Honestly, guys, judging by pictures, you can't really tell which Larry Scott was better, which one was worse. I guess he was equal. So Larry Scott, there is no real best or worst Olympia winning version. He did make a comeback, though. 1979, I believe it was. And that's, with all due respect, that was the worst ever showing for Larry Scott. But it was not even on the Olympia stage. So why did I mention it? I don't know. I probably shouldn't have. The next Mr. Olympia champion, Sergio Oliva. And much like Scott, hard to go by pictures back then, but he was champion 67, 68, and in 69, and if I had to guess, he got better every single year. So by default, 67 was his worst ever Olympia winning version, but that's pretty ridiculous to say, judging by the footage that is available. Some would say he was even champion in 1972, and by then he was far superior to his actual wins in 72. And he placed second, by the way. If you really want to know his worst ever Olympia version, period, whether he won or lost, it was in 1984. Sergio Oliva made a comeback, and he did not place very well. He actually competed 1 year later, 85, but he improved. He actually improved from the therefore mentioned 1984 version. And that, with all due respect to Sergio Oliva, that's his worst ever Olympia showing. But, like I said, guys, I shouldn't really fall down those rabbit holes. We're talking about Olympia winning versions of these guys. And when it comes to the Austrian Oak, Arnold Schwarzenegger, 1980 is without a doubt, hands down, his worst ever Olympia showing. He made a big return. He was on the stage in 1980, and nobody knew up until like a week before or a couple of days before the event. So bodybuilders were upset. You can see fists thrown at Arnold's face on stage. Well, maybe. And a potential tussle backstage almost occurred between Mike Menzer and Arnold Schwarzenegger himself. You could see Mike pointing the finger, about ready to pounce on the Austrian Oak. Apparently, Arnold, he looked at Menzer and he said, "Hey Menzer, you would have probably won last year if you didn't have your big gut hanging out." And then Mike Menzer, he really lost it. He pounced at Arnold and put him in a figure 4 leg lock. And poor Arnold just screamed in pain. No, let go, Mike, please. Help me. Franco, come on, Franco. And then you can imagine it went on from there. Franco dropping elbows from the top rope. I'm just joking, guys. None of that actually occurred. They did get into a little argument, little things of that nature. But other than that, Arnold Schwarzenegger, his worst ever Olympia win was in 1980. Not a very good rendition. The following year, the exact same thing happened. Little Franco, don't do it, Franco. Little Franco, he had to do the same thing. He knew he had the political powers of Arnold Schwarzenegger. He returned. He was champion in 76. Returned in 1981. Shell of himself. Won the title. And absolutely, hands down, he only won it twice. But if you compare the two, obviously, 1981 was Little Franco's worst ever Olympia winning version. And that leads us to the next champion, Frank Zane. And he was the champion 77, 78, and 79. And in all three cases, he was just as good. They were slightly different, but in no situation can I really say one was his worst ever version. If you count all of his Olympia versions, I guess 1980 when Arnold knew he was off too. He was off in 1980. He had a bad accident, did Frank Zane. So yeah, he was down in weight, down in size, and Arnold pounced. But as a whole, Frank Zane, he was pretty good each and every year, up until his last couple of years, actually. When it comes to Chris Dickerson, the choice is easy. 1982 was his only Olympia win, so it was his best and his worst. His actual worst Olympia appearance was in 1984. He did not do very well at all, but keep in mind, guys, in 1982, when he won that title, he was the oldest Olympia champion of all time, so he was no spring chicken. No spring chicken at all. On to the next champion, another one-time champion. I promise, guys, this one will get more interesting. Samir Bannout, his best and his worst. I say it was his best. He looked awesome in 83. And that mustache, impressive. I was just as impressed with the stash. Samir actually competed in 1994 at the Olympia. And if you didn't realize, he didn't do the best. He didn't place into that top 5 situation, and it was his absolute worst Olympia appearance for sure. And now we get to some legacies, baby please, guys. So this one will be more interesting. Lee Haney, he won the title in 84. He's an 8-time champion, so there's lots of years to choose from. Was it his first win? Was that his worst? Probably the least developed, maybe. But his absolute, hands down, worst Olympia win was 1990. Wow, was he down in size. Look at those arms. And this was probably the only instance where you could say, well, there was some controversy with Lee's win. Not Lee, never mind. Gets a little confusing. But 1990, with all due respect, because Lee Haney, one of the most respectful champions, one of the best representatives of bodybuilding, class act all the way, but 1990, And yes, of course, guys, they were tested. They tested them, if you know what I'm saying, in 1990. So everybody was down. And then we get to the juggernaut himself. Dorian Yates. I was not too bad in 1997. Actually, Louis Marco himself called him a hot mess. And you know what? The physique kind of resembles a hot mess. 1997, Dorian Yates was absolutely, hands down, his worst Olympia win. Some might even suggest 94, but I don't think 94 can hold a candle to the greatness of this hot bowl of stew. Wow, was Dorian off, with all due respect. He's one of the best champions of all time, guys. Sorry, Dorianites. Sorry, guys. But 97, you have to admit, sucked. And now I'm really gonna get the haters. Don't you dare mention 2002. Ronnie King Coleman. He's one of the greatest of all time. He is the greatest of all time. He's the best. But he was way off the mark in 2002. So for this video, 2002, Ronnie King Coleman is the winner. He was soft and he was little. Just a little compared to Coleman. Other guys were outsizing him too. It's an embarrassing situation. Telling you right now, it wasn't a good situation. But Ronnie King Coleman, he did, in fact, take the title that year. We couldn't use this version because we are looking for Olympia winning versions. The worst Olympia win. And dare I say, Günther Schlierkamp maybe should have been the 2002 Mr. Olympia champion. Maybe not. Maybe not. That's perhaps blasphemy. Next champion, 2007. It's an easy choice for Jay Cutler. It was perhaps the worst Olympia version, period, of Jay Cutler in 2007. And it was an Olympia win. Can you imagine that? He was punished the very next year, and you can see Dexter the Blade Jackson telling him, I got you next year. I got you next year. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. So yes, Jay Cutler, with all due respect, such a nice guy, but I have to make these videos factual or you guys would jump all over my case. And that leads us to another very just outstanding, like a lot of these guys, great representative of the sport. What an outstanding human being is Dexter the Blade Jackson. And he won the title in 2008. He's a one-time champion. He doesn't have a worst version. He doesn't have a best version. They're both in the same. 2020 was his last appearance on the Olympia stage, and I did this with all the other one-termers. And yes, it was perhaps his worst Olympia version. But for goodness sakes, figure out how old he was, and you show me how you look at 50. 49 or whatever he was. Next champion is the Gift, the Doctor, the Dominant Doctor, PhD, Phil Heath Domination. He was great even in his worst version. 2014, in my opinion, he had a Cassis belly, and the midsection was really the only bad part. I'm not going to sit here and make fun of Phil Heath. He's one of the greatest of all time. It was the infamous year that Kai Green got up all into his grill. It took him off his game. He wanted to fight. You imagine that? All oiled up trying to fight up there on stage? Wow. You go to put him in a bear hug and he'd go whoop. He'd slip right out and go flying through the air. It'd be hilarious. It'd be hilarious. Some people may say 2017 was his worst Olympia win. I do not think so. I think his back was just far superior to that of 2014. So, yes, 2014. In my opinion, that is. You guys got a differing opinion of this? Let me know in the comment section below. But it is my opinion that 2014 is Phil's worst Olympia winning version. And now we get into another one-termer. And may he rest in peace at that. And this is, of course, Shawn Rhoden, Flexitron. If you're going by his worst placing, he did compete in 2011, and he placed at the bottom of the pack. And then the following year, I think he got third or something of that nature, did he not? So, hit the scene hard, but doesn't really have a bad Olympia version. And we should not speak ill of the passed away. Here's Brandon Curry, the next champion, 2019. One-termer, so no exciting conclusion to this one. It was his best and his worst Olympia winning version. Some would say his worst overall was last year, 2023. The guy was in a hospital bed, was he not? Just prior to stepping foot on stage, so not really fair. He competed at an older one. I think 2013, that was probably his worst placing. A lot smaller, too. So maybe his worst version. But considering we are looking for their worst Olympia winning version, I guess it doesn't count. But we have Big Ramy, who is, of course, a two-time champion, 2021. By default, I guess, is Big Ramy's worst version. They were noting those divots in his quads a little bit more. But you know what? At the end of the day, Big Ramrod, Big Ramalama, Ding Dong, he's underrated, I think. Even in 2021, he was still pretty darn good. But at the end of the day, I guess it was his worst Olympia winning version. Hadi Choopan is the last Olympia champion, aside from our current one, and he won it in 2022. He's a one-termer, so you have to count 2022 as his worst, but you know what? It may actually have been his worst Olympia showing. It was the lineup, everybody was off. So in the grand scheme of things, it really was maybe his worst. His worst placing was in 2020. So if 2022 would lose to 2020, I guess Hadi's worst ever version would be his Olympia win, which is crazy when you think about it. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and laddies, I really hope you enjoyed this one. I meant no disrespect to these great athletes. It is just a question that us fans, we want to know every little aspect, and we want to know the best. We want to know the worst versions. And I guess Dorian Yates, he wins. He's the grand champion. He is the grand poopa. His 1997 Olympia winning version, it had some things going on. But yes, he's still more conditioned than most of the guys nowadays. Dorian would have us believe that he was still the greatest of all time. Hit thumbs up on the video, and please subscribe to that channel. I would love to get to that 100,000 subscriber mark. Get one of those little silver play buttons. Show you guys, Have a great one.